Welcome back, everybody, to another amazing episode of UAP Studies Podcast. Jay, I'm super jacked. We have another powerhouse woman in ufology, and we've been getting a few lately, and it's very refreshing.
Absolutely. She's been an influence on us because she's produced a lot of the shows that we've seen. She starred in a lot of the shows that we've seen before we even started the podcast. So it's amazing to have Melissa on today.
Yeah, I mean, she produced Ancient Aliens the first 4 or 5 seasons, and we want to ask her about that. And she's made documentaries and done all kinds of cool stuff. She's a good ambassador for the movement as well as for women in ufology. So we'll be right back, and we're really excited about our guest, Melissa Tittl. All right, welcome back to another UAP Studies episode. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my good buddy and illustrious co-host, Jason Gilmet. How are you?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing really good. I'm really happy. We've been getting some really powerful women on the topic and in the field on the show lately.
Absolutely.
Today is no exception. We're super excited. Today's guest is a TV and filmmaker. She's a producer, an investigative journalist. Right now, she's the creative CEO for Hathor Studios. Their topics range from like meditation and human potential to, ancient aliens and civilizations and all that good stuff. You've probably seen her on shows like Hangar, UFO Files, and UFO Witness, and she's done a lot. So we want to welcome to the show today, Melissa Tittl.
Hey, everybody. So awesome to be here.
Thanks. We're super excited to have you here. We sent a lot of requests out to big name people, and people are busy. So we really appreciate your time. And we kind of have similar thoughts on things as to you. Let's not get too caught up in the minutia, more like, what does this actually mean? And where is this all going? So, yeah, excited to have you. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself before you got into this stuff and what led you to getting into it and where you're at now.
Awesome. First of all, I will say I'm so honored to be here. You guys have a great platform for just talking about the space and what could be happening out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love this question. Because I feel like, where do you get started, right? So I'll say that from a very young age, I was always pretty fascinated with the unknown, whether it was the understanding of like ghosts, or even from I think age 10, I was into ancient Egyptian stuff. And my dad was in the military when I was younger. So we talked about aliens. We talked about other religious beliefs. That was one of the things my parents really wanted to teach us, was all the different religions. And from an early age, I realized that the stories were sort of the same. So it was no coincidence that once I chose my career path, which was storytelling, and I went to school for TV and film, and then found myself in LA, that I immediately find myself working at Paramount Studios for sci-fi films, because I've been a huge nerd for that stuff since I was little. Comic books. I'm like that tomboy, tough chick, growing up, who loved nerdy dude stuff.
Amen. Amen.
That's cool.
And then from there, I worked on a NASA show with History Channel. It was the first time History Channel had attempted to do, I'm trying to word this the right way, a smart show trying to explain what was happening in the universe. Because remember, mainstream is just copying where the audience is at. And this show is called The Universe. And this was our collaboration with NASA and professors trying to explain how space worked. And it was an awesome show, pretty fascinating. And then from there, Ancient Aliens. And that just took it to another level. So I produced the first 5 seasons of Ancient Aliens. And I just kept going deeper and deeper, because those were the questions I had. And now that there was a platform that was successful, this was just the beginning. And it was the beginning of people in mainstream asking, but wait a second, there's all these strange, ironic coincidences. Are they connected? Is there something supernatural happening? Aliens, something else? There's something's weird going on. And that has escalated, I'd say, for the last 10 years.
So you mentioned that you talked to your dad quite a bit. about different stuff. He talked about UFOs. Was he ever a witness to a UFO or anything like that?
No, he not in the military. My grandfather was stationed at, oh my God, not Edwards Air Force Base. Oh my God, I can't remember. It's in Washington State. He was stationed there in 1952. And the day my dad was born, there was a UFO sighting on the base.
Oh, wow.
And my grandfather had saved the newspaper article. We used to talk about it all the time. We used to tease my dad that he was from outer space or something. But it really got my dad thinking and talking about it with us, because as his military career went on in the Air Force, there was talk about, well, in small circles, well, if that's true, I mean, what are our capabilities from a military standpoint?
Yeah. And I always thought that was funny because people think, oh, it's our technology. Well, you go back to 1952, like you mentioned, that wasn't our technology. We didn't have that at the time. And I still don't think that we have that technology now, right? But yeah, it's interesting to hear stories like that, that usually somebody in the family or a friend knows an event that took place or had an event that took place. I often mentioned it before that, you know, when I was doing insurance, I'd had people that would just start talking to me about their experiences, and I never asked them a single thing. They'd just lean over like, I saw them once, you know? I'd be like, what? Like the hair on my arms would just stand up. Like I didn't ask
They
him.
knew you were a safe place, man, that you can
Oh,
talk to you about that stuff.
yeah.
Like, I'm talking about life insurance. Why are we talking about aliens?
Yeah, it was just crazy. They would just bring it up, and then I would be like, wow, it's amazing the amount of people that have experiences, and that it motivates me to continue to, you know, research this. And it's awesome to see that your career, that was also it's also an interest of yours, that this is usually there's a drive behind that, like somebody has a sighting or stuff like that. What did you ever have a sighting, or is this just an interest that you have?
No, which is always disappointing. I feel going to be interviewed. I've never had a sighting. I haven't seen any little aliens. I haven't had, but I've had really strange supernatural experiences. And I use the word supernatural because I really don't think we know what's in any dimension. What we think is a ghost could be alien, right? So
Right.
I'll just use it as a blanket term. I've definitely had experiences with things that don't seem human. But I think my drive from a young age, and especially getting into telling stories and producing, was that I just found that it's not, I don't want to find the truth, because I think the truth is relevant to the person listening or talking, right?
Mm,
Yeah.
I think that the most important thing to do is to gather data, create patterns, and say, what is going on in this field of existence that we can then understand? Because once we accept that aliens are real, or that we accept that we saw a UFO, or we accept that there's other interdimensional beings living, they do exist. And that doesn't mean that they exist because we think they are. They exist because now we're ready to see it. So I think like my job is to dive into the mini truths of the people that have been collecting data for years, the people that have had sightings, the people that are dragged out of their bed at night. All of those people are relevant into understanding what's happening in the unknown.
I have a lot of respect for people in your field that actually produce this media and these shows and documentaries. And we all kind of take it for granted. There's a common wealth of knowledge right now that most people that are enthusiasts sort of know about this. But if it wasn't for the programming and the ancient aliens and all these other documentaries we've watched, like 30 years ago, there was nothing about aliens on TV. It's just sci-fi movies. Now there's legitimate information on networks like History and Discovery that you can kind of feed that thirst in your brain with good stuff. And that's the only reason we do this show. It's a tsunami of bad information out there, but there is some good info. So I have a lot of respect for, again, people like yourself and really committed to not just making movies. I mean, you went to school to be a filmmaker. You could make films about anything, but
Right.
without people that know about it enough to make sure that it's accurately represented, like to, you know, otherwise the fans would say, well, it's nonsense. It's all mixed and garbled. It wouldn't be a good resource. But you guys are putting out like encyclopedia worthy stuff. And maybe in 40 years, it will be in an encyclopedia as the initial kind of trickle effect of this info. So kudos to you guys.
Hopefully. I mean, just to finish that thought, because, you want to know, because what you really asked was, well, what's the root? Like, okay, we get you want to investigate people and the many truths and create patterns. But I think the only way we are going to understand who we are as humans is if we figure out and discover something that's not human. I feel like that we're chasing our tails, talking about policies and people and things and religious beliefs and all this crap. And the thing is that we haven't found out the one thing that would make any other species investigate us in the first place.
Right.
And I think that is the goal for me, is let's define what that human potential is in the field of discovering how big this universe is and what's out there.
So, a question for you. Has anything changed in your way of thinking since the start of this? Did you, like, before didn't believe in abduction cases, but as you were going along, you've become more convinced that it might be a thing? Or is there anything like that you've changed your opinion on? Because we've changed our opinion quite a bit on a lot of subjects, and we're now covering those subjects. So did you have anything like that?
Okay, I have to get out of my journalistic head. So my journalistic head, I would say no, because I don't want to attach myself to any belief system, because I want to keep it open,
Right.
so that I'm a conduit coming through of knowledge so people can decide what they think is real. But if I take that hat off, I'm just Melissa, I would say, because there's so many stories coming out, more and more, every year, every month, it's increasing, no matter what resource is collecting the data. I would say in the last 4 months, I believe that we are getting closer and closer to some kind of contact situation, considering the government is ramping up their involvement and their wanting to tell people that they're interested in them. And I think people will say, well, that's because they have an agenda. Well, of course, maybe they do, but why? Unless something might be happening sooner than we think. I mean, we're making oxygen on Mars right now. I mean, what are the probabilities that we are going to run into some other species, some other being, whether it's biological or some other kind of makeup? I think that we are getting closer to that.
I think one of the statements, like, are we alone in the universe, is going to be the most laughed at question in history, because once we find out the amount of life forms that are out there, we might be in shock, and it's going to make us feel super, super small. I often think that maybe we're not ready for disclosure, because we're not ready to deal with, like, even the war that's going on right now in Ukraine and Russia. We fight ourselves, we kill ourselves. I don't know if we're capable of accepting another species unless they're going to intervene and show us a different way of life, and share with us their technology. I don't know what the effects of that is going to be socially, if it's going to be accepted or if it's going to be an issue.
Yeah, but I think that's why there's so much talk happening about it, because I feel that the more and more people believe it could be a possibility, the less panic. I mean, there'll be definitely some panic, but I think there's always going to be people that don't want to believe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no offense to the people that believe there's a flat Earth, but there's a percentage of people that no matter what, the Earth is flat, and that's it. So no matter what, there's people that are going to hide out and say aliens aren't real. Done. Great. But for 80%, 88% of the rest of the world that is witnessing something on TV and interacting with something, that might be real. So I think also that I think it's going to take something monumental for people to let go of these things that they feel they have to believe.
Right.
There's governments all over the world trying to create policies over how to be more humane. But that needs to come from humans. That's what they demand, that there is nothing else. That doesn't have anything to do with Republicans or Democrats or any other party or any other country. That is the human potential that you're talking about, that I feel that the discovery of extraterrestrial life will immediately bring to the forefront. Who are we? What are our capabilities? And why are we in this universe, and how do we survive?
Right.
Yeah, they didn't get advanced by blowing themselves up. It was from probably collecting resources, pooling, advancing consciousness. They stopped the game and they realized what we're actually capable of as sentient beings, you know, and that's probably, yeah, they probably had a head start in terms of years. I guess you would need one. Maybe not. Maybe if they just, you know, collaborated more efficiently, it doesn't take billions of years to become more advanced than we are. Maybe we're retarding our progress because we're so busy just making weaponry and looking at the minutia and not actually seeing what else could be out there, you know, and that's where we spend our money. So, you know, it would be fitting that that's the result.
Yeah. I mean, and there's also that whole idea of you know, in the future, will half of us be AI, right? That's
Right.
that conversation I was starting. We're starting with the chips in the brain, and then, you know, if we can replace parts of the body, like when, just think of that. Like, let's take the aliens out of the whole thing. We're going to have a crisis on this planet deciding who's really human if half of your body is AI,
Yeah.
right? So if we never discover any other life form, we're going to have a crisis on the planet with that conversation. So we're headed into something.
We can't even figure out if babies are human until they're born. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the
How many
crisis
weeks
is
in a life?
How many
Yeah,
weeks? Right.
exactly. We can't even figure that out. Yeah, you make a very valid point. And as technology progresses, we would change biologically as well because we start modifying ourselves. Like even Michael Paul Masters, when he was on, was describing how we change physically from when we first started as humans to now. And if you continue down that road in the future, like Louis explained it better than I can. Do you want to explain what he mentioned?
Yeah, well, basically, he's an anthropologist, so he's used to looking at bones and, you know, like old things, and he basically theorizes that we look different than we did as Neanderthals, right? Our jaws are shrinking. That's why we're having wisdom tooth issues. Our hands are changing because we're not hunting and foraging. Our heads are growing. So he goes, if you just continue that progression and fast forward, our heads continue to grow, our jaws shrink, our ears and everything else. That causes like a protrusion of our eyes. If we're maybe living somewhere else with thinner gravity or whatever, less of it, we have no more muscle mass. We basically become grays in a million years anyway, regardless. So maybe it's not aliens, maybe it's us in the future. And he has a theory. It's called is it extraterrestrial?
Extraterrestrial model.
Super cool idea that this is none other than us in the future who figured out time travel, who are now coming back to harvest genetic material or maybe prevent some huge destruction event, or who knows, right? Or maybe it's a seeding and it's an acceleration of our, us getting there. We're trying to come back and speed it up for the benefit of the future. It's pretty deep. I mean, you'd have to read his book, but yeah, very cool theory coming from a science doctorate, you know?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I've heard that theory before. Maybe it was him and I just didn't put that together, but that makes sense because a lot of these abduction stories where they're harvesting eggs or sperm or genetic material, they do say that they're harvesting it because they're helping us as a human race. Also, there was a case I was just interviewed for the Whitley Steber series on Discovery Plus.
Nice.
Okay.
Called The Visitors. Little plug. It's really good. It's actually really scary, but it's done really well. It's called The Visitors. There's this woman on there who was interviewed, and her experience was she was already pregnant. She was laying in bed, and a couple grays came in, and there was like a big tall gray. I don't know if it was a tall white, but tall gray. And they, because I'm not sure what sex it is, came over and put their hand on her belly, and she of course freaked out because she's like 6-7 months pregnant, right? And they said that there was something wrong with the child, and she's like, why are you doing this? And they said, why are you so scared? And she said, because you're ugly. And then the being said, you're going to be us very soon.
Yeah.
So
I've heard other people say that. They ask like, who are you? And they're like, we are you. You are us. Like, we are the same kind of thing. So
right.
Cool. Lots of commonality with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before, again, that was a theory that I threw out. out the window because I didn't think, that's not logical. But again, the more we talk to people, the more that keeps popping up. And we mentioned the scary scenario is that it's all of the above. It's us from the future.
Yeah.
It's interdimensional entities. It's extraterrestrial entities. It could be a multitude of things. That's why we're seeing different things in the sky. That's why UFOs or UAPs now don't look the same. They all have a different shape, and the classic saucer shape, we don't see that as much anymore. We see the orbs, popping up, 3 at a time or whatever, doing stuff in the sky. So it's interesting. I think that we're dealing with a multitude of species. It's not just one. And you've covered that many times on your different programs that, you're talking about the tall whites, there's the tall grays, the short grays, the brown grays, which is weird. They call them brown grays.
Mantids, reptilians, all. I mean, the list is a mile long.
Yeah.
The Nordics,
Nordic blondes.
Yeah.
Blue avians. That's like the Anunnaki, the blue feather people.
Yep, the blue feather people. Cool. Yeah.
That'd be interesting. You never hear an abduction about that, right? The blue feathered people. They don't seem to take people.
Even ufologists to think you're nuts at that point. Like, come on, man. Tell everyone it was a gray. Don't be talking about bird people with blue feathers. What the hell's the matter with you?
Cat beans, heard that. Not so much in abduction cases, but people like come in contact with cat beans, I guess. But I'd say that there's like a whole cast of characters that seem to be coming here a lot. In the Palladians and Nordics, everyone's like, they're so pretty.
You mentioned changing opinions, and not only do we and everybody else have to kind of wrap our brains around this, but it's interesting to hear people that have like many decade-long careers, like George Knapp, for example. We had him on a couple months ago, and we love George Knapp, so we're like talking about Bob Lazar and all this, and he was talking about his book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, and I said, explain that. Like, what is the connection here? And he basically like went into it and said, look, I've been a nuts and bolts UFO guy for 30 years. And now it's everything. It's cryptids and Bigfoot and portals and, blue orbs and all this shit. And people are taking home random illnesses when they have contact with these things, and, obscure autoimmune diseases like Hashimoto's. And his wife has had really weird stuff that he didn't even want to talk about. And we're just like, holy cow, like George Knapp has changed his opinion on what this actually is. He went down the rabbit hole, and it's crazier than he even thought. And I think more and more of that's coming out now. And as you mentioned, the government's starting to really look at this. And maybe this is just the natural course of how it was going to go anyway. Maybe it's spurred on from the Tic Tac video and movements like guys like Tom DeLonge and all the rest. Maybe it's been from good TV programming that you've been producing for a decade, right? But either way, I think it's positive, and I think it's good to have not a fixed opinion. And in fact, we have Jacques Vallée coming on for our 100th episode. And the biggest thing I took away from that interview with him was he said, we have to suspend judgment. And like, he's a guy that should be fixed in his ways and no, you guys are crazy. It's always been this way. And he's just like, suspend judgment. Just when you think you've got this, it's like a handful or a fistful of sand. You have it 1 second and then it's gone a second later. So suspend judgment, because it really is stranger than you can think at some point.
Yeah. And I think the more we talk about it, it's not so strange anymore.
Yeah,
that's true.
I mean, the idea of humans flying in the air was so strange until somebody figured that out. Now we're flying
until we did it. Yep.
So I think that we create our reality, and there's definitely something pushing through, really pushing our consciousness to understand, though. I mean, I think it's been so intense the last couple of years, not just because I'm in it, but because there's just so many different outlets publishing things, and it seems okay. I mean, just a couple of years ago, if you talked about aliens on a TV show, they'd be like, well, I mean, like a little green man, there's like that like jokiness about it.
Yeah.
Stigma.
But now that's a conversation you can have with a bunch of housewives, and they're like, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe, but it's
more
not
mainstream.
It's more, it's happening around us.
Yeah.
And
so,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No.
I was going to ask you on the basis of consciousness. So do you think that there's validity to like the CE5, like the contacts that people are making or stating that they're making. I've never participated in it myself, but do you think there's a validity there?
Yes, 100%. Again,
Yeah,
to
I
what
think so too.
I don't know, but it is definitely happening. And there's two things I want to say about this. People, humans, I mean, all we know is that the Sumerians were around 6,000 years ago and created a civilization. But let's just say for hundreds of thousands of years, humans, or whatever it was of humans, have been in contact with something in another dimension. That has been happening. And there's cave paintings about it. There's whole religions written about it. This is something that how they are doing it, they're maybe not doing a CE5, but they're doing some other kind of meditation, and they're connecting with something, and they are simulating actions within that. You know, this is something that ancient Egyptians talk about in several texts, in several different temples, about how they're working with something on the other side. Now, CE5, their whole goal is to bring something into existence and then communicate with it and have this experience with them. That isn't any different than all the other stuff I just explained that has been going on since the beginning of time. So the question is, what are we communicating with? And I don't think it's the same being or the same group or the same intention or the same agenda. And my second point to that is, I think this is where the human potential really needs to step up. What are your intentions trying to reach into the field and bring something into existence? Because it could be good or bad. Right. And this is where that alien talk gets into, they're here to conquer us versus they're here to help us. I mean, there's humans that I think would help me versus humans that would hurt me, right? Same thing. So I think that the CE5s are real, and that's been going on for a long time. And two, if that's true, which I think it is, then you need to be careful of what you're bringing into the field.
It's like if you mess around with poltergeist or things like that, if you don't have the right, state of mind, or your heart's not in the right place, you're asking for trouble. That's when you start having really weird things and dangerous things going on. If you're approaching it as, I want to help you, I want to learn, do you have anything you want to tell us? Like, you go with an open heart, and usually you have a good experience, right? I don't do that myself. I'd never played with a Ouija board or anything like that. I don't like to invite things into my life, but I also believe if your energy is bright, those things can't hurt you. Nobody ever got stabbed with their own car keys from a poltergeist, right? But I do think maybe there can be demonic things and weird shit that goes on, and I don't know what I don't know, and I reserve comment. But I think if you go at it with the right heart, with anything, even like with our show, we put in a lot of work. We have a lot of people that we could have on that we're like, we don't think it's best for the movement. We want science-minded people, open-minded people, and it's nobody knows, nobody's an expert. And there's so much infighting now, like on Twitter and everything else. It's not helping the movement. Like, let's just stop with that, and let's get smarter. Let's not just dabble in the dumb stuff,
Right. There can't be one person who knows everything about what's happening.
Exactly.
There just can't.
Yeah.
I mean, if we really believe that, then we're back to, like, I don't know, 1300s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's
6,000
right.
years ago when this whole thing started in the first place. Like, there's not one person that knows everything.
But there is a few in, especially the field of ufology, that one charge a lot of money for experiences, and they claim to have all the answers, and that's where I get mad, because for me that's a charlatan, right? That's somebody selling snake oil and saying, hey, you can have this experience for $2,000, and that's where I have an issue with it. Is I'm okay and open to all ideas and concepts, but once I hear somebody makes tons of money doing something like that, I'm kind of like, oh, now I'm not too sure about if I believe it, because there's that money exchange in there, right? But no, you mentioned when Louis said nobody ever got stabbed by keys, you were like, oh, you objected a little bit. Yeah. Do you have a story?
One story. I don't have the story, but there's got to be one story where that happened. Like, somebody's gonna like write into you guys like, wait, that happened to me. I guess I'm not in the right state of mind.
I'm sure. Yeah. I think they want to get your attention. That's what I meant. I use that the stabbing of the keys as an example, but I think when they throw something across the room or your cupboard's open or whatever, it's something. And I've had a poltergeist experience, and in my case, it was chairs being rearranged in a business that I owned. I'm the sole key holder and things are moved around. And so I believe that it's real, but it never hurt me. It wasn't overtly aggressive. It's just, and I consulted with other people who know about these things, and they're like, something's just trying to get your attention. And now that I look back, I kind of think I know what it was about. It was telling me that it was time to move on. There was things happening, energies that were not for me. And, a big page was going to be flipped. And that's exactly what happened. So I think it was more of, or maybe my energy was heightened and I was just attracting that kind of stuff to myself, because maybe they saw that vulnerability and I created that vacuum and that's what came in. So I really don't know, but I know that things can do that for sure. So I believe in poltergeist. I just don't think they can really hurt you if you have an open mind and you communicate with them. I think we still reign superior.
Or the most important thing is to have no fear. So, and that's really with all of these experiences too. I feel that I've talked to a lot of people that have abduction experiences, and they want them to stop. Like, they've been going on since they were a kid, and they're still having them, and they're still coming, and they use techniques to say, I will you to stop. I have no fear. You cannot come here anymore. So I think that the best explanation of that is in that's not new anymore, but when they redid it, and remember the clown chasing them, and they started making fun of the clown, and the clown started shrinking, right? It's like,
love that movie.
It's not scary unless you make it scary. So that's where those kids figured out how much power they had over this thing that they were so afraid of.
Do you find that you have a few favorite cases of all the cases that you had in the abduction phenomenon? Is there like a few that stand out for you that you like a top three?
Well, the reason I was invited to kind of narrate the story of Whitley Steber was I think that this is a very important abduction experience. This is a time in history in the 80s where there's not people talking about aliens.
Yeah.
There's always been, like in Hollywood, a few alien movies, right? This is before Spielberg. This is a man who's already wealthy. He's a screenwriter. He's
successful.
He's successful. There's no need for him to come up with a story.
Yeah.
I always look at that too, right? So he has this experience. It's so powerful that he then writes the book Communion, and he had to publish that face of the gray alien. This is the first time that people all over the world are seeing a published face of what a gray alien looks like. And what happened was thousands of people all over the world were like, I see this face. It comes to me at night too. So is that just because Whitley created this phenomenon in the field, or had it been happening and no one had a platform to talk about it? So it's a famous case for me because it's a lot like other cases, right? It happens, doesn't know why it's happening. It's frightening. It's not like it's pleasant. He communicates with the thing. Eventually he realizes, they tell him, this is for the betterment of humanity, and we want you to tell this story. I don't know how I feel about that, but again, right? So now has communication with these things.
Right.
And he still does, to a point. And the reason why I think this is one of my favorites is because it's not that it's different than anybody else's, but it started the trend. So to me, I think, did they purposely pick him to make themselves known within our consciousness?
Right. And then the work with like Bud Hopkins and John Mack, coming out, like these guys had no reason to come out and talk about, aliens abducting people because they had successful careers. I mean, Harvard, for crying out loud, right? But yet they put their reputation on the line because they absolutely believe that this, and it's either that it's really happening, or it's a major mental illness that is known throughout the world now that is undiagnosed, that we've never looked at before. So it's either one of those two things. So for me, I think it's the first, because we've talked to Jim Semivan, who, while working for the CIA, had an experience with grays in his room. That's crazy. The people in the CIA and the Defense Department are having experiences the same as we are. So we are thinking like, it's just happening to the public. No, it's happening to them as well.
To humankind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to everybody. So this is why it's becoming more, and not having guys and women coming on and saying, I've had these experiences. This is actually really happening. I'm starting to believe absolutely 100% that these abduction cases are legit.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I'm not going to say their names right now. One of them is on UFO Witness. She's on the Colorado episode. She's similar to a lot of Bud Hopkins' work with several women, where they're repeatedly taken and eggs are harvested, and then later on in life they are still taken to then hold the human babies up in the spacecraft, because they need human touch. They can't actually, even if they create them in a tube,
Right.
they can't survive without human touch. And besides that's fascinating, does that play into the whole thing, like they're trying to save our human race and all that kind of stuff that we talked about earlier on this podcast? But is that evidence of this thing that we have not figured out about what is so powerful about us?
Right.
And I'm not saying touch by itself, but is there something that humans radiate off of themselves? Like, as there's some kind of power. Yes, people talk about frequency and energy and all that kind of stuff, but there's got to be something unique about the human existence for that to be special, that other beings would be coming here to investigate us or want to talk to us or use us as food, right? All those explanations.
Right.
We're just the best huggers. They just need a hug. That's why they're here.
Have
And
you
we keep
spooned
throwing
with a
stones
human?
at 'em.
They
They
are
just need a
so
hug, man.
comfortable.
I wanted to ask you about some of your current projects. Like you mentioned UFO Witness, great show. You've been on, I've seen a few episodes with you on it. And like, tell us about it and what else are you working on?
UFO Witness, I did a bunch of shock docs for Discovery Plus, Alien Endgame. I just talked about the Whitley thing. And then, UFO Witness season 2 with Ben Hansen. We did that whole thing. And then I'm actually coming out with a documentary quite soon about Atlantis.
Nice.
It's not necessarily about aliens, but there is a code that I have found that I think Atlantis is a metaphor for. I think it actually existed, but I think that the way we understand it from what Plato talks about is an actual code to kind of the opening of this field where we can make contact.
Oh,
super complicated.
So it's more metaphorical based then. Atlantis is a metaphor for communication.
It's a metaphor. Like, okay, it's a concentric circle city. It's in the middle of the ocean. It's the measurements are this, blah, blah, blah. But I think, and the people I've been interviewing, it's pretty fascinating. It's like I've gone myself into a deeper rabbit hole, but it's pretty cool. So that's coming out beginning of 2023. I have a film called Black Knight Satellite where I cover that the case of Black Knight Satellite, which was in 1952, 53. And that one, what's really interesting about that's already out. That's on Forbidden Knowledge TV. And we'll be selling that to major platforms soon. That's really discussing that there's a signal that's been trying to reach us. So we talk about the fact that it could be this Black Knight satellite, since it keeps showing up and people keep seeing it, and it keeps, we have more technology now to detect things like this. And but it talks about that people have been receiving signals and messages from this thing. And so is it an ancestral thing, or is it just something from another species that's monitoring us?
Right. Even the I forgot how to pronounce that.
Oumuamua.
That flew weird. Like, that's not, if it was a rock or anything in space, it would have a trajectory that is pretty much predictable. This one just veered right off.
Yeah.
And you got the Avi Loeb now researching that. He's looking in the ocean as well.
Yeah.
So that's his new thing. So I was kind of thinking maybe the whole Atlantis thing and what he's looking for might be, correlating somehow. But I used to be on the fence about Atlantis, and again, more I talk to people, the more I realize that maybe there's something there.
Yeah, I think everything's a metaphor. Again, my expertise is like meditation, aliens, ancient stuff, quantum physics, right? We talk about all this stuff, and then somehow they get put all in the same category, which is kind of strange. But in a way, it's this unknown place, right?
Yeah.
But with Atlantis and some of these ancient cultures, and even like writing ancient aliens, I think everything is just a code if you can crack it. I think that they couldn't really say what they had to say. They had to leave it behind in a code, because at a certain time we will figure out what it is that we are supposed to know.
Right.
It can't be revealed. When they wrote some of those texts, only a couple people in the world understood it.
Right. And even during the abduction cases, a lot of people say there's always some sort of message that's given about humanity, right? Like, you guys, there's something wrong with your species, or you guys are killing the planet, or so there's always a message that they give to people, which I find that to be hopeful, because that I don't believe in the threat narrative. I know a lot of people are pushing that threat narrative, saying like, we don't know what these things are. They could be a threat to the United States or Canada or England, Australia. I don't believe in that. I believe that if they're going to do some harm to us, they already would have done that.
If we're supposed to be slaves, we'd be slaves.
Exactly. And even the abduction cases, I was talking to somebody who was mentioning about how people are being tucked back into bed, like being brought back, like just, yeah, it's just, and it's crazy because, I know the experiences must be terrifying, but when you look at the overall, like, what was there really damage done besides the psychological aspect of it to the person? Yes, if it's the pregnancy, like you mentioned, the hybrid situation. But overall, they don't seem to be, there's no malice there. There's no evil intent as far as we can tell.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to play neutral on that. I mean, there's a lot of shows that I get invited to be interviewed on that they do talk about the threat narrative, but I think it's because people like drama, right?
Right.
If you have a show about how everybody's super nice, it's like, okay, well, it doesn't get the blood going when you're watching entertainment. But I think that just with anything, nothing is good and nothing is bad.
Yeah.
I think you have to really feel that out for yourself. I think that I've talked to a lot of people that have not turned that corner and said that was a positive experience. They still think that that was pretty negative.
Right.
And I don't want to be taken against my will. And there's people that are like, okay, I'm going to embrace this because I got a message and there's a reason. And so I don't know, I play kind of neutral on that. I think, like we discussed earlier in this documentary, like there's so many people picking other people apart and finding all these problems with everybody else that we're not helping the field. So I feel that if I stay neutral in that and just uncover more of these truths, then we're actually going to get to the bottom of what's happening. Why?
Right.
Yeah, that's the right mindset to have. Again, if you go at it with this is right, this is wrong, or you're only going to research your bias, you're only going to look at stuff that you believe to be true, you could be missing most of it because you've got blinders on. You're so focused on, no, it's got to be this. Well, what if it isn't? And your entire career has been for nothing, right? So if you want to find the answer, don't sort of look for what you think is the answer. Listen to everything. Our show is the same platform. Sometimes we have people on here and they have certain opinions we may not share, but it's good for the whole subject. Let's bring all the information to the table. Let's not look at half the data. I think Jacques Vallée was mentioning that on the Nimitz, when they came and took the footage after the TikTok or the Tic Tac video, how do you really study something with half the data? There's not a scientist in the world that would say that's the right way to go about doing it. So bring it all to the table. We all have an equal seat because nobody has proof. Nobody knows for sure. And nobody's a quote unquote expert. So let's have some humility. And who knows, maybe the study of ufology makes us more understanding and tolerant of each other. Maybe that's just good for humanity in general. It's just this topic that lights that fire. This is the catalyst. So all positive things moving forward.
It made me realize that people are idiots usually, as a whole, like, as a species.
I think it's pretty well a guarantee at this point.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what my revelation was about this whole thing.
People are idiots.
Yeah. Like in a day, you keep a pen and paper handy, and at the end of the day, you'll have at least 40 names on there, right? Like, it's just crazy. The world's nuts. Where can people find you online?
Sure. I have social media, Facebook, Instagram, just Melissa.Tittl. And then you can look up my studio to see when things are launching, hathorstudios.com. And I think that's it. Yeah.
But you're pretty
Perfect.
much everywhere. Somebody can just Google you and they'll find you.
Yeah. Apparently, if you Google me, I'm worth like $20 million. So
Oh,
that's
really?
Wow.
Yeah. My stepson brought that up to me. He's like, I heard you're worth $20 million.
It's crazy the stuff you find online once your name starts getting out there, right? And your name is out there, so it's crazy the stuff that you'll find, right? That's crazy. Louis, do you have any final questions for our guest today?
No, I just want to extend a really warm thanks, Melissa, for coming on our show. You're a powerhouse for women, just in like TV and filmmaking, but as well as the field of ufology and consciousness and everything. We're super happy to have you on. We'd love to have you back anytime. If you have any cool new projects or anything in the future you want to discuss,
anytime.
You're among family here. We'd love to have you back. So thanks again for being on our show, and best of luck. Keep killing it.
Awesome. Yep. Hope to talk to you guys soon.